Why is it that we see so many people that get back pain, it becomes chronic, they struggle to get a handle on it, they struggle to find the right sort of treatment that helps them, they struggle to find the right sort of exercises that help them, and then before they know it, they're going around in this vicious cycle of not being able to deal with the underlying problem. And let's face it, it affects an awful lot of people. Well, in this video, we're going to go through one really important thing, a nuance, a way in which the human body works, and then 3 little examples that most likely apply to you watching this video right now, and that if we can correct these things or adjust these things or just be mindful of these things, we can maybe stop them ever developing. And more importantly, if we have had them, we can reverse the changes here in the vast majority of cases, which will have a massive positive impact when done alongside your appropriate rehabilitation work if you've got back pain right now. With that out of the way, let's get straight into today's video. If you've been having back pain for a little while, you've been looking around the internet and you've been watching videos like this, you're probably a little bit confused by now. There's lots of different stuff. And one of the important things we want to address at the start of this video is there's a sect of people that are really going around saying, oh, look, you don't worry about your posture. It's not important. You can round your back while you're lifting. People encouraging that. And I'm not talking about just general people. We've got practitioners, etc., encouraging that, saying, oh, it's actually quite strong, and saying this is probably going to ruffle some feathers. So if you've got questions about this, post it in the comments below. But by the time we finish this, that will become important. And it's not to say that having a rounded back whilst we're lifting to train ourselves when we're a healthy individual is something that may be helpful, and maybe there's some research around that might well be true. But we're talking about someone with back pain and someone who's trying to get over a back injury, and that couldn't be further from helpful. It really couldn't. So what is the reason that this is the case? Well, it really comes down to our ligaments. The spine is built to have a certain structure to it. We change this structure as we go through our young childhood years and through our adolescent growth spurts, and it sets into a normal structure. This structure has curves. These curves are in the spine. We all know we have a rounded in the middle back where our rib cage is. It bends this way, so side on like so. And then in the lower back we have a lordosis. We also have one in the neck, which is a backward bending curve. These curves are maintained not by the muscles. We don't have segmental control over our spinal joints. If I said to you right now, can you please move C5 and C6, for example, or move your CT junction, rotate it left. You can't do that. It's not possible. Muscular contraction, muscular spasm, muscular control controls the gross movement. We can look our whole neck left and our whole neck right and back and forwards, and we can bend our whole back forwards and backwards, but we have no control over the segments that are participating in that particular movement, as opposed to, for example, our elbow. I can bend my elbow without bending my shoulder or moving my shoulder, and the same thing for my wrist. I can move my wrist like that without bending my elbow, but we don't have that in the spine. The spine, in its alignment and its integrity, is maintained by a series of imbalances between ligaments on the front and ligaments on the back. And of course, this runs the whole way down the spine into that lower lumbar spine. And obviously, the more weight that we have on the body, so the lower down the spine is, the more important these ligaments are, or the more load they're bearing. So if we have problems, yes, problems can be really bad in the neck, but when we think about the load and the forces that are at play in the lower back, it really is something we want to get right. The ligaments themselves, though, are dynamic. They're formed based on stresses and strains that are placed on the body. And this natural development is great, but it can be altered, and we know this from experience, both from a research standpoint, but also from practical experience. And there are videos on the YouTube channel that show before and after. It takes time, a couple months, to make these measurable changes in the ligament balance and in this fundamental static alignment of the spine validated on spinal imaging. But it is possible to change those, and that's not magic. That is just a way in which the ligaments respond to stress and strain. And this is going to start to get into the more, nuts and bolts of this particular video, because when we're sat down for long periods, we're putting stress and strain on our body. Now, if we think back 40, 50 years ago, it was societally acceptable, considering a normal occurrence, to be smoking all the time, smoking in, out, etc. And yes, some people did, some people didn't, but it was generally encouraged as a societal norm. Nowadays, and even back then as well, sitting down for extended periods is part of our daily basis. It's part of what we're doing on a day in, day out basis. Whether it's at work, whether it's sitting down for 3 hours every evening watching your favorite series on Netflix or whatever it is, but we're putting static stretch to these ligaments as part and parcel of daily life. And this is something that is just true around Western society, but it's something that contributes to the change. And that's when we get on to creep. So because so many of us don't think twice, we go to school, we maybe go to university, we then sit in a desk job, and then we sit at home in the evening, and then we sit for hours on end in the car, going to and from here, there, and everywhere. We're sat down still for long periods. And what we find on x-rays and on images, and just from experience, is that the segments that lose that natural backward bending are the 4-5 and the 5S1, and those are the ones that so commonly we have people with disc injuries. L4-5, L5S1 disc injury, the sciatic nerve, all this area focuses down here because these segments should be bending backwards quite considerably. We should have a good degree of backward bending in these segments here, these last two green ones and the orange one. But when we see the sitting position, the slouched position, the slumped position, it's very much rounded through here. It's not so much through here, although here does change, but the really significant change is this here. And you see what that does? It opens out this here. It opens out those gaps there. And what that does is it creates a disproportionate stretch through these tissues, which themselves won't necessarily cause injury at the time, but over many months. And bearing in mind, some of the stuff on, for example, the YouTube channel, before and after x-ray imaging, that's 3 months, maybe 4 months or 5 months, let alone 3, 4, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, and that's only 20 minutes a day. It's not 3 hours of watching TV or 3 hours of sitting at a desk or 6 hours, 8 hours a day for years on end, causing change to the ligament balances in this spine. And why is that important? Well, that creep causes these ligaments to change, and therefore the fundamental alignment of the body, the way in which we hold ourselves on a daily basis, which means that other habits, we're sat down in the chair for extended periods. Well, when we're sat in the chair like so, bum forwards in the chair, back completely flat and stretched through all these ligaments, that starts to become our normal. And then when we stand up, we've all seen them. The person stands up and it looks like they're almost still sitting there, over like so. And that creates issue, that creates strain, creates unnecessary strain. And all of this could not be a problem for you until you have an injury. It's quite often you see the example, people can have bad posture and they have to have back pain. That's fine. And there are a lot of people that might well have worn brakes on their car or tires that have, I remember a little while ago, the car goes into the service station, there's a massive rip in this tire, it needs to be replaced. Well, I didn't know. You didn't know that the tire was replaced until you have to stop suddenly and then it goes. Now, is it okay? Because 20% of tyres that are on the road aren't involved in car crashes, but still have rips in them. Therefore, having a rip in your tyre isn't a problem. No, it is. It is a problem because it increases the likelihood of those things happening. And when those things go wrong, when we have this bad posture, it makes it more difficult for us to recover and maybe results in the instant being much more significant in terms of negative impact than we would otherwise want if we didn't have that bad posture as well. So these ligaments can change. They're very dynamic. And the actions that we do on a daily basis, for example, that slumping for long periods, it changes the very structure of our spine. We're built to be very, very strong, but this creates little pockets of weakness, and they happen to be in certain areas that people frequently seem to injure and struggle to get better from. Well, what do? We can change those things. That's okay. But if we take a step back just a moment and say, what was that difference that we just discussed, that forward-bearing posture? The sitting down has not only weakened this area, but it means that day in, day out, we're standing in a position with our center of mass forward of where it should be, which means that now we've got the habit of sitting down badly, but now standing up badly too, because our body has changed. The ligament balance has changed here, so we habitually stand leaning forwards a little bit more. And that means we're increasing the load on an area that is now vulnerable. So we're increasing the mechanical strain, much like if you're watching your phone right now, if you're watching on a tablet or a computer, it'll be easier to demonstrate. Hold it out in front of you at arm's length, that magnifies the weight, that's just physics, and the strain on the tissues. The lower back that's not getting better, as we mentioned at the very start of this video. That's not a good thing. But then we take it a step further. We've been through points number 1 and points number 2. We had the slumping in the chair, causing change in the ligaments. That being continued when we're standing up. Further change while we're standing doesn't take place because we're dynamic. It's not passive static stretching. It's that passive static stretching that causes the change in the ligaments. It's just that the consequences of that when we stand up is that we've got a terrible posture and the neck's going off forwards like so. But then when we also think, well, what does that do for our lifting and our bending and our putting our socks on and our emptying the dishwasher and our playing with the little one on the floor, whatever it may be? Well, that means instinctively we're just going to bend from the back even more. The back already moves. The back's just going to bend more. And therefore we strain this area even more so. And those three things add up in a tremendous manner. And if you then injure your back, having those three things stacked against you makes life very difficult, especially if you don't understand that's present or you're not aware that that's a present factor. And especially if you're being told that bending with a rounded back is okay and the posture is not important. Because those factors that we've discussed in this video, hopefully that's made you think a little bit more about that and understand why. That's why we do these videos. We do these videos to hopefully give you guys a better understanding of why we're saying what we're saying and why certain approaches may not necessarily be right for you if you are someone with a back injury. If you're a healthy, normal person with perfectly good posture, great muscular development, great ligament balances and no injuries, then yes, we can do things in a little bit of a different manner. When we have an injury, especially an injury that's not recovering, we need to think about things in a sensible, common sense, logical fashion and critique them as well. Now, we've painted a lot of stuff that's maybe not very good, but the reality is, watching this, is it okay to sit in an odd evening and do something, sit and watch a Netflix series or go to the cinema and sit there and I'm going to be a bit uncomfortable afterwards because the ligaments have been stretched out a little bit and they're not used to it and they don't like that. And that's a cue to say, hey, you probably shouldn't do this because it's not good for the human body. But if you went to the cinema consistently every single day for 3-4 hours a day, what would happen is your ligaments would adapt and then you wouldn't get the same soreness after you finish in the cinema. Until you get a back injury, and then there's a whole host of other problems. But those ligaments only change, and the change only sets in when you are consistent with this. So that is to say that for those of you that are healthy watching this, you haven't really got a back problem, which probably isn't going to be you, because you wouldn't have listened to all that ramble if you didn't have a back problem. But you're going to get away. It's going to be fine to sit down, watch something on the sofa, go and do this, sit at the office. But if you have a back problem, we want to be mindful of those things. And bear in mind that it's the consistency of doing them day in, day out without thinking, just going through the motions. I've finished my work day, I've had my food, I'm just going to go from sitting at the dinner table for the last 20 minutes to going sitting in front of the sofa, on the sofa for the next 3 hours, 2 hours, hour. It's that just constantly going through that routine that allows those ligaments to change in a negative way. Quite equally, doing the right sort of things allows us to put good practices back in. And those good practices over time, I know they require a lot of mental effort, but after that period passes, they become good habits that you naturally and instinctively do. You're busy until the evening, you're doing lots of bits and pieces, you finish having dinner, boom, 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 clearing away, and then you go up to bed. Maybe the news is on at the same time or the TV's on at the same time. If you're watching that while you're doing those bits and pieces, you're stood up, you're moving about, you're not giving chance for those ligaments to set in. Remember, it takes a good period of time. You're talking about 20 minutes of static stretch on the ligaments. That creates that change repeatedly over many days. That creates that change. So if we can just interrupt that pattern, we're going to do an awful lot of good. So we covered quite a lot of topics in here in this video today. If you've got any questions before we go any further, do let us know in the comments below, because it's understanding these things and asking questions to help you understand these things that really gets results, especially if you've got a bit of a longer standing back pain. We'll go through a few more specific things in a moment, but the bare minimum, if you're watching this, just get up when there's an ad break. Get up every 15 minutes or so, move around, even while you're watching the TV or sit down in the office, move around a little bit, be fidgety. Because if you can be fidgety and not camp out like a statue for extended periods, then you disrupt these patterns and you'll do okay. You won't get those sort of end stage ligament changes to be quite so pronounced, or at least you can stop that happening from this point henceforth. At the end of the day, if you've got these changes because it's happened up until this point, don't worry, don't look back, look forwards. What can we do going forwards? And ultimately, just recognize it's going to take a bit more practice. You want to take videos of yourself when you're doing your exercises. You want to be mindful, ask other half, family, whatever it is, friends, hey, am I moving right? Am I stood up straight? Look at photos. Quite often, a lot of people notice these things first time because someone else has taken a photo of them over there. And all of a sudden they've gone, gosh, I stand like that? That's awful. Just learn to stand up a little straighter. Use the wall drill, standing back against the wall, bum, heels, back, head against the wall, feeling what that feels like and how alien it may feel. And the more alien it feels, it might even be painful in some areas, sometimes here in the neck, sometimes in the lower back, sometimes it gives you a bit of sciatic pain. It gives you an illustration of just how off the mark you may well have been for a long period of time, and how things don't quite move that well anymore to get you just standing up straight. And you'll see this in the extreme in older people who've been like that for a long period of time, and there's been a degree of degenerative change that's made that situation much less rectifiable. Or maybe it can be improved, but not quite back to normal. And we want to avoid that. If you're watching this and you're younger, you really can make a massive difference here. And by younger, that's a whole bunch of people. That's not sort of 15, 20-year-olds. We're talking about 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. You can all make changes in our body and make improvement. It doesn't matter how old you are. Even beyond 60s, 70s, you can make significant change. It's just if we change those habits, and the longer they've been there, the harder they are to change. But if you can be more aware of that when you're doing your day-to-day activities, that can really help. Now, when we're starting to do strengthening activities, That's the same sort of thing. If we're learning our squats, we've mentioned, if you've got that rounded back and you're not aware of it, or you're someone who slumps traditionally, then there's a very good chance, slumps in the chair that is, there's a very good chance when you squat or do those sorts of simple movements, you're doing them incorrectly. You're doing them incorrectly habitually. Whether it's a specific squat as part of an exercise program or a squat in daily life, you're going to probably be doing it incorrectly, with the back bending inappropriately. So take the time when you're doing those strengthening exercises to learn to do it properly. Reflect, take videos, make sure that you are moving towards something that's good. And we've got plenty of guidance. See the recent videos that have been done on range of motion and learning to improve the range of motion slowly, safely, and sensibly. So we've been through a whole host of different things in this video, but really it all comes back to those ligament balances supporting or imbalances supporting the natural alignment of our spine, and the habits that can sometimes interrupt that for the worse, and it makes real challenges seem a little bit more difficult for our lower back. And if you're someone that's had a longer standing lower back issue, whether it's sciatica, so no pain in the back, maybe just pain in the leg, or amalgamation of both, really, hopefully these things have helped you better understand why that is and giving you a little bit of that understanding so you can move forwards from here and start to deal with the problem more effectively. As always, if you have questions, this is a bit more of a lengthy video, post in the comments below, ask a question. It helps you understand things and it helps others as well. Other people see the comments, other people read the comments, and they will read the answers as well. So please don't be shy. If you did find it helpful, give us a thumbs up. If you know someone else is struggling, you know what to do, you can share it with them. And as always, if you find these videos helpful and want more guidance and support like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more videos. See you next time. If you want to learn more about the premium Back in Shape membership, there's going to be a video somewhere underneath here. And if you want to stay up to date or tune in to some of our more recent live streams and the Q&As at the end of those, then that's going to be down here. And remember, you can subscribe to the channel up here and hit the notification bell to make sure you know when we next go live, so you can join us for our next live stream and Q&A.